One Piece accidentally created the perfect dictatorship blueprint, and it's been hiding in plain sight this entire time. 3 different rulers, 3 completely different approaches to absolute power. But here's what's really disturbing. Only one of them actually succeeded, and it's not who you think. The implications for real-world power structures? Absolutely terrifying. Now, before you click away thinking this is some conspiracy theory, I'm a political analyst, and I've spent months studying the governance systems in Eiichiro Oda's world. What I found was unsettling. See, we have 3 distinct models of authoritarian control. Enel, the God King who rules through divine terror; Kaido, the warlord who dominates through pure, crushing strength; and Doflamingo, the puppeteer who controls from the shadows. 3 dictators, 3 completely different approaches to power. And here's what we're going to discover today. Which of these fictional tyrants actually cracked the code? Which system of oppression proved most efficient? By the end of this deep dive, you'll understand not just how power really works in One Piece, but why these patterns keep showing up in our real world over and over. Trust me, this is going to change how you see power forever. Let's start with the most obvious one. Kaido, the beast. Thud, thud, thud. That's the sound of Kaido's approach to governance, raw, unfiltered brutality. His philosophy? Simple. Might makes right, and I am might. For 20 years, Kaido held Wano in his iron grip through what political scientists call coercive authoritarianism. Every rebellion, crushed. Every dissenter, beaten into submission. Every challenge to his rule met with overwhelming violence. And you know what? It worked. For 2 decades. Think about that. 20 years of absolute control through nothing but fear and force. That's longer than some legitimate democracies survive. But here's where it gets interesting and terrifying. Kaido's system had a fatal flaw that most people miss. He was too successful at being scary. See, when your entire power structure depends on personal intimidation, you create what I call the Superman problem. You have to be invincible forever. Because the moment, the very second, someone proves you can bleed, crack. The whole system shatters. That's exactly what happened. One defeat to Luffy, and Kaido's 20-year empire collapsed in a single day. His generals scattered, his army fled, his entire governmental structure gone. Brutal? Absolutely. Effective in the short term? Undeniably. But sustainable? Not even close. Now let's talk about the complete opposite approach. Enel, the so-called god of Skypiea. Where Kaido ruled through fear of his strength, Enel ruled through fear of the unknowable, divine authority, the power of a god. And let me tell you something that'll give you chills. Enel's system was psychologically brilliant. He didn't need to be everywhere at once like Kaido. He didn't need to personally intimidate every citizen. Instead, he created something far more powerful, the belief that he could see everything, know everything, punish everything. I am watching you, was his unspoken message, and I am inevitable. This is what political theorists call panoptic control. The idea that you might be watched at any moment creates self-policing behavior. Enel's citizens controlled themselves because they believed he was omniscient. For 6 years, this system worked flawlessly. No rebellion, no resistance, just submission. But here's the twist that reveals Enel's critical weakness. His power was built on a lie. He wasn't actually omniscient. He just had really, really good hearing, thanks to his devil fruit. The moment someone figured out his trick, the moment Luffy proved that God could be punched in the face, the entire mythology crumbled. One rubber fist shattered 6 years of divine authority. So we have Kaido, too dependent on personal strength. Enel, too dependent on mystical deception. Which brings us to the third option, the most dangerous one. Don Quixote Doflamingo. Now here's where our analysis gets uncomfortable. Because Doflamingo didn't rule through strength or divine power. He ruled through something far more insidious: control. Complete, total, invisible control. Where Kaido crushed his enemies and Enel terrified his subjects, Doflamingo did something far more sophisticated. He made people want to serve him. Think about Dressrosa for a moment. On the surface, it looked like a paradise. Happy citizens, prosperous economy, beloved king. But underneath, Doflamingo was pulling every string. He controlled the underground weapons trade, creating conflicts that only he could resolve. He manipulated the government through celestial dragon connections. He turned potential enemies into unwilling allies through his string fruit powers. But here's the really twisted part. Most people in Dressrosa didn't even know they were being oppressed. The toys walking around? Those were human beings transformed by Sugar's powers, erased from memory, turned into happy slaves who couldn't even remember their own names. Doflamingo created a system where the oppressed enforced their own oppression, where victims forgot they were victims, where resistance was literally impossible because resistors were transformed into compliant tools. For 10 years, this system ran perfectly. No major rebellions, no significant opposition, just smooth, efficient control. And here's what should terrify you. Doflamingo's system only fell because of external intervention. Luffy and Law didn't defeat a tyrant who was losing control of his people. They defeated a tyrant at the height of his power, ruling over subjects who genuinely believed they were free. But wait, there's more. Let's examine the counter-argument here, because this is where our analysis gets really disturbing. What if efficiency of control isn't actually the best measure of successful tyranny? What if we're asking the wrong question entirely? See, when we look at these three systems through the lens of pure longevity, something interesting emerges. Kaido lasted 20 years through strength. Enel lasted 6 years through fear of the divine. But Doflamingo, he lasted 10 years through invisible control. So, by the numbers, you'd think Kaido won, right? Longest reign,
biggest territory, most direct power. But here's what changes everything: sustainability versus impact. Kaido's system was like a forest fire, devastating, overwhelming, but ultimately it burned itself out. When he fell, his impact vanished with him. Enel's system was like a cult, powerful while the leader was present, but completely dependent on maintaining the illusion of divinity. But Doflamingo's system? That was like a virus. It didn't just control people, it changed them. Even after his defeat, the psychological patterns he created lingered. The real question isn't which tyrant lasted longest. It's which tyrant created the most persistent form of control. And that answer is deeply unsettling. Because Doflamingo didn't just rule over people, he rewrote their understanding of reality itself. Think about this. In our real world, which dictatorships have proven most durable? The ones that rule through obvious force? The ones that claim divine mandate? Or the ones that convince people they're not actually being oppressed at all? The ones that make oppression feel like freedom. The ones that turn victims into willing participants.
The ones that operate so smoothly, so invisibly, that resistance becomes literally unthinkable. Now, here's where our thought experiment reveals its most disturbing conclusion. Doflamingo's model, the puppeteer approach, wasn't just the most psychologically sophisticated, it was the most complete. Kaido could destroy your body. Enel could terrorize your mind. But Doflamingo could rewrite your soul. He created subjects who policed themselves, economies that enriched only him, and social structures that made resistance impossible while making oppression invisible. In terms of pure governmental efficiency, Doflamingo's system was nearly perfect. And that should absolutely terrify us. But why does this fictional analysis matter in our real world? Because these aren't just anime characters, they're mirrors. Every day we encounter systems that echo these patterns. Leaders who rely on strength and intimidation until someone stronger comes along. Authorities who claim divine or ideological mandate until their contradictions are exposed. And most dangerously, systems that make control feel like freedom. The Doflamingo model isn't just fiction. It's a playbook that's been used throughout history, and it's being refined every single day. When you see a government that creates problems and then offers itself as the solution, that's Doflamingo.
When you see systems that make people grateful for their own oppression, that's Doflamingo. When you see power structures so sophisticated that questioning them feels impossible, that's Doflamingo. The most effective tyranny isn't the one with the biggest army or the scariest threats. It's the one that makes people choose their own chains. And once you understand that pattern, once you really see it, you can't unsee it. So, which dictator actually won? Here's the answer that'll haunt you. None of them. And all of them. Each system failed because they were built on fundamental contradictions. Kaido's strength was finite. Enel's divinity was fake. Doflamingo's control was invisible, but not absolute. But here's what One Piece really teaches us about power. The most dangerous tyranny isn't the one that rules through fear or strength or even invisible manipulation. The most dangerous tyranny is the one that makes you believe you need it. The one that convinces you that without it, chaos would reign, that freedom is too dangerous, that control is actually protection. That's the lesson hidden in these three fictional models. Power doesn't corrupt just the powerful. It corrupts our understanding of what freedom actually means. And maybe, just maybe, that's why stories like One Piece matter so much. They give us a safe space to examine dangerous ideas, to ask uncomfortable questions, to see patterns that might be too scary to confront directly. Because in the end, the real victory isn't defeating the dictator. It's remembering what freedom actually feels like and refusing to settle for anything less.